What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about some news that you might have heard about. Tariffs. More tariffs. Tariffs for everyone. I guess we're just handing out tariffs like they're candy now. So, joking aside, my president, Donald Trump, has decided to roll out his new tariff plan just a few days ago. And from what I've gathered so far, and from what I've heard in the news here in the United States and from different people, everybody hates this. Nobody is happy about what's happening around the world and here in the United States. And we knew that this day was coming and this tariff plan was coming, and it was really built up, and it was somehow it was way worse than everyone actually expected. Somehow it was worse, like much worse than people thought it would be. And a lot of Americans are not happy about this, actually. And I have to say, I think more Americans that didn't really have an opinion on all this stuff are finally starting to question some of these policy decisions the US government is making. And that might have something to do with our economy here in America. If we take a look at the market today, you can see the S&P 500 pulled up. It's down 4%. And it's not just today. If you go to the 6-month chart, it's down, down, down. Year to date, it's down 7.4% for the year. For the S&P 500, that is horrific. And I mean, if we go to the date that Donald Trump came into office, like around January, end of January, yeah, like right there, Donald Trump came into office and it's just been going down. That's the S&P 500. You can look at the NASDAQ as well. Down 5% today. Oh my God. Wow. Yeah, so this is something that I actually kind of thought would happen. For a lot of Americans, they don't really know, what to think about tariffs, or, I'll be honest, I don't know much about like how the economy works and economics and markets. And so a lot of Americans don't have a stance or an informed opinion about tariffs, whether they're good or bad. But when it hurts our wallet and our pocketbook and prices go up and our investments, if you're invested in the S&P or NASDAQ or a lot of American companies, if your investments start to tank and you have less money and everything is costing more, you start to care. It turns out you start to care. It's kind of sad that it took that for a lot of Americans to kind of start thinking critically about this, but I think more and more Americans are starting to get pretty unhappy. I know around the rest of the world in a lot of countries, it's been obvious for a while now, from what I've seen online, that everyone else around the world has been very, very unhappy. But today I want to take a look at this video. This is by TLDR News Global. Huge shout out to them. Somehow they created this video in like a day, one day, that's going to hopefully explain this whole situation and help me determine just how screwed we all are. So let's take a look.
On Wednesday afternoon, as part of what he called Liberation Day, US President Donald Trump announced a sweeping raft of tariffs.
Liberation Day. That's another thing. I'm going to let this video play, but I got to pause it. Yeah, Trump was calling it Liberation Day. Did you hear about that? Like as if this is supposed to be some kind of holiday in America, some kind of national holiday, some kind of grand day in American history. Yeah. Well, a lot of people are actually calling it Liquidation Day, as in all of your assets are getting liquidated because they're worth nothing now. Yeah. Nobody is calling this Liberation Day. That did not catch on at all. It's just something weird Trump came up with. It's honestly kind of annoying, and let's keep going.
Including a 10% universal tariff on literally everything coming into the US.
Oh my
A 34% tariff on Chinese imports to go on top of the 20% tariff already in place.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't know how long this is going to take for me to get through this because there's just so much going on. That's just crazy. 10% tariffs on everything, everything coming into the United States. It's no longer just like cars or aluminum. It's just everything against everyone on the planet. So everyone everywhere can hate us. As for the China tariffs, there was already 20% tariff on China. Now we're adding 34, not changing it to 34. We're adding 34. So it's going to be 54% tariff on China. So many, like if you think about Amazon, so many of the Amazon stores that are US based, import from China. Their goods that they sell on Amazon. A lot of stuff is made in China and sent here to the United States. I can't overemphasize how many businesses in America depend on buying stuff and importing stuff from China. So this is going to 54% tariff. 54. I mean, 54? Like, you can't even wrap your head around that percentage. 54%. This is unlike anything in history, truly. So this is going to hurt so many Americans and American businesses that depend on China and goods from China. So this is so huge.
And a 20% tariff on all EU imports. It's hard to overstate quite how insane all of this is.
Exactly.
Assuming that it actually happens.
Yeah.
In fact, CNBC has described it as worse than the worst case scenario for markets. So in this video...
Yes, exactly. They nailed it. This is worse than anyone expected. The only possible argument I've heard so far is that Trump has way overdone it on purpose to seem on brand with him, unpredictable, and that he's hoping lots of countries are going to try to strike deals to avoid these tariffs, and that these tariffs, they're coming into effect, I think, April 5th, which would be tomorrow. So some people think Trump way overdid this, and this is insane on purpose to try to get deals made. It's a threat, and that it hopefully won't actually happen, but I don't know, time's running out. And it's like, I think some things I've heard, Europe and a lot of the rest of the world is just kind of over it. And it's just like, go ahead, do it. Destroy yourself, America. Go ahead. We're going to take care of ourselves, and life will go on without you. I think that's kind of the global opinion at this point about America.
Video, we're going to take a look at what happened on Liberation Day and what might happen next.
Okay. Yes. What is going to happen next?
Before we get into it, if you enjoy our content and appreciate...
Okay, so they're just talking about their channel, TLDR News Global. Really great channel.
Us working through the night to get this video to you, then grab a copy of our magazine Too Long.
Oh, they have a magazine. I am going to skip their ad here, but do check them out because they're actually awesome for doing this.
And there's a limited number of each code, so act fast. Now, before we get into the meat of Trump's tariffs, a bit of context. Going into Liberation Day, there was a fair bit of ambiguity over what tariffs Trump was actually planning on imposing.
Yeah.
In the White House memorandum announcing the tariffs, which was published back in February, Trump promised, quote, reciprocal tariffs.
Yeah.
And this is something he actually talked about a fair bit during the campaign.
Apparently, I see a lot of different news on all the different social medias, and it's hard to, I don't know, everything that I see is true or accurate, so, take it with a grain of salt. But from what I know, have seen anyway, not know, but have heard, but that the only reason Donald Trump can even legally do all of this is because they are classified as reciprocal tariffs. even though, as we'll discuss a little later, it's the way that they calculated the tariffs other countries have on the US is absolutely insane. So none of this even makes sense and arguably shouldn't even be legal.
He promised, quote, an eye for an eye, a tariff for a tariff, same exact amount. Now, at first, this idea sounds pretty reasonable. After all, it is true that America has lower tariffs than most other countries. And if you subscribe to Trump's mercantilist view on economics, you might think that this is unfair, because it makes it harder for American companies to export to the rest of the world than it does for the rest of the world to export to the US.
Right, but that's only if this premise is true, that all the countries around the world have these massive tariffs on the United States. And we're just reciprocating. We're just equaling. No. From what I understand, like what we have done the other day with Liberation Day and these global tariffs, none of this is equal or reciprocal. We have massively overdone this in a way that no one even conceived possible. You can't even begin to overstate how crazy it is.
Equally, it seems like a fair way to encourage free trade across the globe. After all, reciprocity implies that if these countries were to drop their trade barriers, the US would simply do the same. However, if you think about it for a second, you realize that this is a pretty, problematic policy. For starters, if reciprocity was applied to individual exports, as opposed to entire countries, it would be enormously complicated. Yeah. America's tariff schedule currently covers 13,000 line items, and the US trades with roughly 200 countries, which implies that Washington would have to manage 2.6 million individual tariff rates.
I never even thought about it like that. That just seems like logistically impossible.
It would also lead to some pretty weird policies. It would imply, for instance, that the US should at least massively reduce its 100% tariff on Chinese EV imports, a policy that Trump was seemingly very keen on. To make things even more complicated, Trump made clear in March that his understanding of reciprocity wasn't just going to apply to tariffs. He also wanted to include non-tariff barriers like currency devaluation, which reduces demand for American products internationally, or trade-related taxes.
Exactly. This is the crux of the whole thing. They're going to show, that chart that Trump held up with all the different countries, and it says, this is the amount of tariffs that the EU has on America. And the way that the Trump government calculated the EU tariffs on America that we're responding to, the way those were calculated make absolutely no sense. Those are not straight up dollar for dollar tariffs that we are reciprocating. Those valuations that they came up with on that chart, the way that they did that is absolute lunacy. It includes not just the tariffs, but their own little formula, which includes currency devaluation and taxes and basically anything else they wanted to come up with whatever number they could have come up with any number.
And Trump was particularly fixated on the EU's value-added tax, even though the vast majority of countries, not just the EU, use some sort of VAT, and VAT doesn't even discriminate against foreign goods. It's applied to both foreign and domestic-made goods equally. Also, how Trump's team planned to calculate the effective tariff rate, including not just the actual tariff, but also the impact of these non-tariff barriers, was always very unclear.
Yeah.
This is why, going into Trump's announcement yesterday, there was actually a fair bit of market optimism. The S&P 500 actually rose for 3 consecutive days beforehand, making up for some of its earlier losses.
Yeah, the market went up a little bit before the tariff announcement.
And the dollar held pretty steady. There was clearly some hope then that Trump and his team were just using the threat of reciprocity to leverage concessions from America's trading partners, but that, on Liberation Day itself, Trump would exploit this ambiguity as to what reciprocity actually meant in order to introduce some relatively manageable tariffs. Unfortunately for, anyone with money in the American stock market, that's not at all what happened. Instead, on Liberation Day, Trump announced perhaps the biggest single-day increase in tariff rates ever.
Ever. Seriously, He was right. Trump was right about something. It was a historical day. What a day it was. What a day. Not for the reasons he thought.
Tariffs weren't just applied to individual items either, they were applied to entire countries, as well as a flat 10% tariff on all imports into the US. There was a 34% tariff on Chinese imports, which is apparently going on top of the existing 20% tariff, implying a 54% tariff overall. A 32% tariff on all Taiwanese imports, a 20% tariff on all EU imports, and a 10% tariff on all UK imports. And how these tariffs could be justified as reciprocal is also really quite unclear. Now, according to the chart that Trump displayed during the speech, it looks like the flat tariffs being applied to all of these countries are either equal to or roughly half that of the effective rate that these countries apply to the US.
Yeah. So, and it basically, if you pull up charts of like the actual tariffs that other countries have against the United States, now what we are doing to the rest of the world, like we are off the chart with the compared to the tariffs against us. The tariffs we're threatening, they don't even fit on the chart anymore. So yeah, basically they just pulled out this chart here where they came up with a bunch of random numbers that allow us to now say, hey, we're just reciprocating. We're only doing half. The Philippines tariffs us at 34%. Except they don't, but that's our calculation, so we can do 17. 17 is still outrageous, but now it's just been, like, justified by this weird, super vague calculation.
As we said earlier, how Trump and his team calculated this effective rate, which apparently includes currency manipulation and non-tariff barriers, but we have no idea how they did it.
No idea.
Take the EU, for instance. Trump claims that the EU implies a 39% tariff on American imports. But it's nearly impossible to square this with the latest data from the WTO, which suggests that the trade-weighted average tariff on American imports in the EU is less than 2%.
Exactly. This is turning me into the Joker or something. This is like legitimately making me go crazy here. But all right, I'll try to hold on for the sake of the video. Yeah. Jeez. The effective tariff rate of the EU, I think, EU against us, the US, is like 2% or less than 2%. Somehow Trump calculated it to be, 38% or something? What was it? 39%. Just a little bit off there, just a little bit. 2%, 39%. What's a couple, dozen percentage points between countries? It's not that bad, right?
Or take Brazil, which despite being internationally renowned for its relatively high trade barriers, got the minimum 10%. The same as Singapore, which is internationally renowned for its liberal attitude to free trade. And it's also higher than Russia, which seemingly got an exemption for some reason. Even Israel.
Yeah, a lot of people are pointing out that Russia is not on the list, notably absent from the list. I don't know if that's because we do so little trade with Russia that it's not even worthwhile, or if it's just suspicious and it's like, it's definitely not a good look, is it? It's not. No matter how you cut it, no matter how you rationalize it, it's like, why wouldn't Russia be on there? Like, it doesn't matter how much trade we do with them or whatever rationale. Maybe we have tariffs on them already or regulations against trade with them. It's not, just put them on the list. Like, the whole Trump-Russia thing, that relationship already looks really, really, really bad. And this just further substantiates that.
Which made a big show of cutting all tariffs on US-Israeli trade only a couple of days ago, has been slapped with a 17% tariff for some reason.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, what does all of this mean for both the American and global economies?
Yeah.
Well, even pro-tariff economists would admit that in the short term, there's going to be a fair bit of pain. Let's start with what this means for the American economy.
Yeah.
At the time of writing, the S&P 500 was down 3% and falling, which is pretty massive by out-of-hours standards.
Yeah. They announced all this after hours, after market trading hours. Well, it's the next day now, and the markets opened, and everything plummeted. That's the update for the US markets. Yeah.
And while the stock market isn't the real economy, the American economy relies more than ever on demand from the richest 10% of earners, which now account for half of all spending in the country. And those earners' spending patterns are disproportionately affected by movements in the stock market. Now, you might expect less domestic demand to result in lower prices, but these tariffs will almost definitely stoke inflation in the US by making imports more expensive, at least in the short term. This is both bad news for American consumers, but also for the Federal Reserve.
This is very bad because we just spent the last 2-ish years trying to combat inflation, like in the United States, raising rates, we've already been feeling pain for a long time now, trying to combat inflation. And we finally kind of got it under control, and then this happens.
Which could end up stuck between a stagnant economy, which needs lower interest rates, and persistent inflation, which needs higher interest rates.
Yeah.
Things don't look much better for the global economy either. Obviously, these tariffs will be bad in and of themselves, again, at least in the short term. But their severity and almost randomness means that they're overwhelmingly likely to invite retaliatory tariffs from affected countries.
Yes, that's so important. Yes, spot on. It's bad enough that this is a thing, the US tariffs. That's not the end of it. This is obviously stoking more to the global trade war that's begun. Of course other countries will have reciprocal tariffs to our reciprocal tariffs, and that would be the rational response. And also the response is going to be cutting out the United States from international trade. And apparently Trump wants the US to become more isolationist. Well, you're definitely getting your wish, because no one's going to want to do any kind of business with us, given this. And no one even knows what to expect. How can you even do business with us when you have literally no idea what to expect out of us, or if you can even trust what we're going to do and say?
Who will probably decide that this is just the only way to negotiate with Trump, even if it just compounds the economic pain for now. Honestly though, this is unprecedented territory, so you really ought to subscribe if you want to stay up to date. Now, as we've demonstrated in this video, there's a huge amount of uncertainty in the world about politics and current affairs, often with few easy solutions.
I think that's the end. Now it's just another ad. But this was a really great video. Pretty incredible to come up with this recap and analysis in such a short amount of time. So TLDR News really came in clutch here. As for me, it's I don't know. It's almost too overwhelming. It's so far beyond what anyone expected to happen. And maybe we should have expected the unexpected. That would be the logical thing at this point, wouldn't it? But it seems like a lot of pain is coming for the United States and the rest of the world, and I'm still really curious what's going to happen in the next day or two while these tariffs are kind of in limbo and when they're going to be implemented, and then we're just going to see what's going to happen. But it certainly doesn't look bright for the United States for now. I don't know if there's some grand master plan coming into effect with all this, but it'd sure be nice if that happened anytime now. But I think, like they said, a lot of economists just agree this is nonsense. And, I don't know. Maybe we're just waiting a couple of years for a new administration to come in and open up free trade again. And hopefully, countries around the world will be willing to do business with us again. Hopefully, once all this is over, if we survive, I don't know. Anyway, this was definitely worth taking a look at. I really enjoy being informed about all this, because obviously it affects us, it affects the world. My goodness. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, feel free to give this video a like, or leave a comment with your thoughts on all these Trump global tariffs and all this craziness. That'd be real interesting to hear about more opinions on that. And if you're interested in more videos like this, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.